Hey everybody, welcome to Rust Belt Startup. I'm your host, Ryan Miller. This is my podcast where I have long-form conversations with artists, entrepreneurs, people that are living unconventional lives in unconventional locations. And, you probably know that I work with entrepreneurs as part of my business, right? We love seeing the success stories of people that have, left their 9-to-5 and started a great company that makes a bunch of money or has a bunch of users, raises a bunch of money. We love those headlines, and there's no shortage of people wanting to tell you those stories of how great entrepreneurship is. So it's safe to say that we really romanticize this. We love those stories, but you don't see a whole other side of it, and that's going to be what we get into today. I meet a lot of people that are non-technical, and I don't mean they can't use a computer, but they're not developers, and they want to start a tech company. And there's not enough of those stories. We don't really talk about what it might feel like when you're not a technical founder, but you want to build a tech company. So today's conversation is with Kevin Barone. He's a practicing attorney who co-founded Vlawsity. This is an online do-it-yourself estate planning platform, and it's designed to take something that traditional law firms do and make it accessible for a fraction of the cost. And Kevin said very honestly, this is the hardest thing he's ever done, like harder than law school, harder than the bar exam, harder than working in a big law firm. And this is not a story about wills and trusts. This really is about the challenges that come with building a tech product and not being a tech founder. So it is about doing research and making sure that your product works and is legal. You got to invest money, spending money and not knowing if you're ever going to get it back, and getting punched in the face by your own technology when you learn that you got to rebuild the whole thing. It's really an honest conversation and reflection about learning the hard way what you don't know about tech and marketing and working with investors, all of those things that go into building a tech company. So if you've ever kind of thought, well, I got this idea, how hard could it be? A lot of times people think that the idea is the hard part, but it's not. Version 1 of the business might not be the hard part. The pitch deck isn't the hard part. The hard part, as you're going to discover, might just be surviving long enough to get it right. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Kevin Barone from Vlawsity. We have never talked about this at length. I know you as being a lawyer first, and then what's the hair club for men thing? Like, I'm not just an owner, I'm also a client. So
right, yes.
So I've used the product, full disclosure. First of all, let's just start this conversation with what is Vlawsity? Let's just start right there.
Yep. So Vlawsity it's an online do-it-yourself estate planning website software. So, if you need a will, if you need a power of attorney, if you need a healthcare proxy, if you need a HIPAA, you go on our website, you answer probably 15 to 25 questions, and between 15 to 25 minutes, you create your own estate plan.
Okay.
And so, that's what we developed. And the reason that we developed it is because, we believe that estate planning is extremely expensive and not accessible. Some of the figures that you would see, the product that we offer, if you were to go to a brick and mortar law firm, it would cost you probably between $1,500 and $2,000. So we're offering for a single person for $150 and a couple $250.
It's an order of magnitude different, right?
Absolutely.
Why is it so expensive? And at a brick and mortar?
Some of it's overhead, but I'll be.
It's just what the market is.
Yeah, it's what the market is. That's one of the reasons. That's a segue into why I got into this, why we created the company. Because as a lawyer, my practice focuses on kind of two different areas. One is like transactional real estate, which has residential, commercial development type of work, and then the other part of it is litigation. So what I've seen, at least with the residential aspects of real estate, a lot of it is it's forms.
Sure.
It's not. There's not a ton of really heady, complex stuff. And New York's one of the states that is we call it an attorney state. But if you were to go to another state, they have title companies that do all of it. So the attorney is largely taken out of the mix. And looking at that, I'm like, with all the technological advances that are happening, obviously AI, we kind of looked at it, and I'm like, this is going to change in a really big way. And it happened in my career, in my life, at a very prescient time, I would say, because I had just left a really big firm, and I started with another lawyer. He basically called me up out of the blue. He's like, listen, I've worked with you before. I'm getting ready to retire. I want somebody to kind of come in and take over the business. So I kind of went from this big firm where everything's taken care of and all you really have to do is do work, to be into this more entrepreneurial role. So I started that transition, and it's weird because I always say this to people. They're like, you left this really big firm. Why did you do that? And I'm like, because I just wanted to, I wasn't going to worry about, commas and spacing, because it gets that aspect.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, and for me, it was like, I just want to practice law. I want to service my clients. I don't, and it not worrying about the client and not the bureaucratic structure of a big firm, and not to throw any shade about the firm I work for. That they're wonderful people. They, learning there kind of set my whole career up, but it opened up another prism in my brain. Not focusing on that upward bureaucratic mobility opened up all this other space in my head where I'm thinking about other stuff that I necessarily wasn't thinking about before, and that's where Vlawsity kind of hatched. And the origin story is I was sitting at my new office with another lawyer. His name's Ted Perry, and we were sitting at the closing table doing a residential real estate. We're both of us are kind of talking smack, God, can you believe what a pain this was, and how
Is this lawyer on the other side of the transaction?
Literally on the other side of the transaction. We're sitting the way you and I are talking, and we kind of just hit it off very quickly. And we just started talking about other things. I'm like, oh, do you do evictions too? He's like, yeah. I'm like, can you believe what's happening with the law? And there was. So from this one closing, again, we're sitting next to each other for 30 minutes. We start talking to each other just about cases and hey, did you ever see this? Did you ever look at the CPLR here? Just bouncing ideas off of each other. And it started to become, we're on the phone with each other until 10:30 at night talking about various different cases, helping each other on stuff. And we became really kind of, fast friends. And, we're thinking, we started trading cases, and, I think I co-counseled on a couple of cases with him. So we started this business relationship immediately, but we became
started the relationship.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And and it happened kind of effortlessly.
Yeah.
And then he came to me one day. He's like, listen, I have this idea. I want to talk to you about it. He goes, can you meet me, at he's a golfer. He belongs to the Onondaga Club. He's like, meet me over there. It's a really cool place. We could just talk. I'm like, great. So if you ever go into that place, it's really kind of an imposing, but I knew him. He's very down to earth, but we go there. I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm like, oh, let's see what we can talk about. And so we're sitting next to each other at this table, and he starts to lay out the whole concept. He's like, and he's an estate planning attorney. So that's his business, so he's like, we were talking about, residential real estate being so,
paperwork heavy,
paperwork heavy, and it's it's not complicated. It's kind of, it's not complicated, and it's very form based. He's like, well, it's the same thing in my business. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, a will is a form. He's like, a trust is a form. He's like, imagine if we could offer, we started to talk about price too. I'm like, how much is it? I'm like, I've heard a lot of different. He's like, for a trust, he's like, the going rate right now is between $4,500 and $8,500.
And it's basically a form.
So
you're relying on their expertise to tell you what to put in the form too, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And but again, that's a very very huge number if you're talking about your middle income population.
I also don't think most people know, what is actually a trust. Who needs one? I mean, this is these are things that most people I think don't think about.
Exactly. And so he lays this out, and he's like, and the price point is what kind of, I'm like, are you serious that much? He's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you're like, I'm in the wrong business.
That's literally what I said. I'm like, so when are we going to start working on trust together? So, he said that, he goes, but it's all form based. He goes, just imagine if we automated the whole thing and people could go in and do it themselves, and we could offer this to the entire country. And I'm like blown away. I'm like I'm firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
Like everything's churning. And I'm like, what are we going to call this thing? And he goes, I'll never forget it. He goes, legal forms and a snap. I literally said, I'm in. Within like
wait. Okay, so he goes legal forms and a snap.
Yep.
And you're like, I'm in.
Yes.
I hear that and I go, I'm out.
Yeah, really?
No offense to Ted. I was like, that's a terrible name.
No, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
but it was like the
I get it.
It was the concept, like how it like I'm like it just clicked. Like yes, we can do this.
Yeah.
Simply and offer it. Mass product. And I was like, and it literally the conversation was. I'm like, how much do you think we need to,
get this started
to get this going? He's like, I've kind of my brother's, involved in, web development, and we think we have the company, and he's like, I think it would be like, $25,000, and I'm like, a piece or between each other? He's like, initially, he's like, he goes, I think we could split it. I'm like, really? Now at the time in my career, it was progressing very well. Sure. And, I had just kind of started like working with just another attorney, and my own practice was, doing very well. And I'm like, I was looking to invest in something, young, where if it failed, it's not.
It's not an extinction level event.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So I had already been kind of thinking, what I was going to do anyway, whether it was just going to be, I'll buy some rental properties, but I really, that didn't excite me.
Yeah.
So I said to him, I said, listen, I said, I got to go home. I got to talk to my wife, because I can't just throw that, that someone would notice if that went missing. So I went home and, I talked to my wife, and I kind of told her the same conversation. And she's like, yeah, that sounds great. And I called them up like 2 days later. I'm like, let's do it.
Okay. So stop for a second. I have questions. So first of all, there is, and Ted's not here to defend himself, okay?
Right.
But I think it's a pretty big leap of faith. I meet people all the time that are like, hey, I've got this great idea for a business, but you can't tell anybody. But I've heard that idea before, right? Mm-hmm. It does take a vote of confidence for him to go, all right, I'm going to bring someone else into this.
Yes.
And trusting that you're not going to, everyone's worried that someone's going to run off with that idea, right? But I think as we will discover, that the idea is just like that, the tip of the iceberg, right?
Literally the peak right out of the water.
So you've got this trust and relationship with Ted, and before you started like the formal, kind of entity or whatever, was there any conversation about like, are you guys just splitting this 50-50? Is that kind of where?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the.
And what did that conversation look like? Because most people don't even have it.
So, again, when, for me, and again, just kind of being a lawyer and just being, very, conservative in my, I guess my business transactions, that was the first thing I said. I said, we're going to do that. If we're going to do this, if we're going to put in to do this, it's got to be 50-50. Mm-hmm. And he's like, agreed.
Okay. And that was it. Okay. Yep. So then you started an LLC for it?
Yep.
Okay.
Started an LLC. But from that point, we didn't just, immediately find a company and start it. Like we did a lot of research, like initially. Like I remember going to his house, I met his brother. That was, and we sat there and talked probably for over a month and a half.
Okay. Before you did anything.
Before we did anything.
What were you researching? Like market opportunity, or were you just trying to figure out like, my number one thing, again, as a non-lawyer is, you're like, oh, all of these forms are, they're forms. But then my immediate concern is like, okay, well, if I do them myself, is it legal, right? There are all these questions that I think the customer has to, does it hold water? Are those the questions you're asking?
That's the first thing we did. So, well, the first thing we did was, okay, who's the main competitor?
Yeah.
What's the market look like? Okay. And then anybody that's going to do a startup, to be honest with you, and I'll get into this as we continue to talk, but I would have done more.
Okay.
I would have done even more market research, but we did market research and we had one main competitor. LegalZoom was already there.
Sure.
LegalZoom was the pioneer.
Yep.
Okay. So we knew that the concept of the business was legally plausible.
You're not landing on the moon here.
Right.
Yeah.
We knew that it was there. I mean, LegalZoom is more LLC. That's kind of their thing. They do estate planning, but it wasn't their main thing.
Yeah.
There was one other company that was just emerging that was kind of the market leader. And when I say market leader, I don't mean by a whole lot. I think by the by the time we were thinking about this, in fact, Ted didn't even know it existed until after we kind of
pulled the trigger on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So, we looked at it and we kind of looked at, kind of what their prospectus was. And they had, a lot of times when companies invest, they have, go through like an A or a B, C round funding.
Yeah.
You can go and look to see what they raised. So I think they had raised at that point, it was like something like 8 or 10 million, which isn't like catastrophic in terms.
Yeah, but that's 100x what you're doing.
Exactly. Right. So my point is, it's not like we were like, we're going to create the, Amazon's competitor.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, there's some room here to grow. There's room where I think we could, put our mark on this and do what we're going to do and still, make
compete.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you're looking at this and you say, hey, they raised an A, B, and C round, did you stop and go, is there a reason they had to use so much money? Because you're talking about using 100th of that to get a minimum viable product out.
Right. So we looked at it and we're like, they're in all 50 states.
Okay.
So we knew that, obviously to get to that point, we were going to need to raise. But, you have to start at a certain point.
Sure.
We had to develop kind of what our own mark was. But the second, other thing, again, and this is kind of where I think, being a lawyer really helped us, was we need to make sure what we're doing is completely
legal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I kind of took that, I took that task and I basically looked at LegalZoom. And again, not only are they the pioneers of, online do-it-yourself products, they're also the pioneer of legal jurisprudence as it relates to actually offering a online do-it-yourself legal services.
What does that mean, legal jurisprudence?
So it means that they basically, through getting sued by all the states that they went into, they basically wrote the book through, not them themselves, but the judges that they were in front of wrote the book on what is permissible under the law as a non-legal law firm company that offers legal services, do-it-yourself legal services to the general public.
So they took all the incoming basically and sorted out the case law around it.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it was one of them was called Janus. That was a landmark case, and they ended up with certain guardrails. It ended up being legal, and so what the states sued LegalZoom on was, it's actually a professional responsibility issue. But what it says is that a non-lawyer can't give legal advice. Okay. And what they were saying is, we're not giving legal advice. We're asking you questions that you answer, and our software populates a form.
Yeah,
okay?
That's it.
Yeah. And now, there was, obviously when they first started out of the gate, they had personnel that was answering questions and, kind of skirting that line a little bit. But what it did is it came up with an actual, a fundamental test that you could look to that was prescribed by a court where you could say, okay, we can't give legal advice to customers. We can't get into the specifics of why you should do a trust as opposed to an irrevocable trust, or why you would do a will, or why your particular scenario would make it more sense.
But if I come in as a customer and say, this is what I want, I'm not advising you. We're just giving you the form.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And again, we tailor the questions to bring out.
Sure.
I mean, that's also,
they're all decision trees. That's all it is.
It's exactly. It's a decision tree.
Yeah.
So that took about 3 weeks, and I remember I still have it. There's this legal size thing, and it's like this big, and there are all these decisions. So what I did was I kind of took all of the cases. The big one was in North Carolina. There was another one that was in Missouri. And I basically just did a blueprint. I'm like, this is how we have to do this, and this is where we stay legal. And then once that, we're like, okay, ready to go.
Cool.
And then started off on the next part of it, the technological part.
Well, that's the thing, because we talked about this earlier. You're not, no offense, you are not a technical founder.
Not at all.
I meet people all the time that are like, I got this idea for an app, and I'm like, do you know how to code? They're like, no. Do you know anyone that knows how to code? No.
Right.
And so it's like you get stuck. And so you're in that same boat where you're like, okay, we got an idea. We've vetted the market. Now we got to build the damn thing. And this is, I'm going to say this is what year is this? This is Claude Code.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So we were, I think
2023?
2023, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And I don't think we actually had a viable product, something that worked until 2024.
Yeah,
I want to say. So there was a lot of work that happened. But that what I would say is being, if I could turn back the clocks of time, I would have, got web development for dummies. I would have talked to more people
just to be able to know what you don't know.
Exactly, and that's the one thing I would say as a co-founder of a startup and somebody that came into this and got on this journey, which is we're going on 3 years, and I've invested a lot of money and heart, soul, blood, sweat, tears, anything you could put at it. You don't know what you don't know, but you better find out because it's. And again, just being a lawyer, I see this every day. It's cold-blooded out there. You know what I mean? It just is. Like if you're going into business, you're in a market where it's a free market and anybody can do whatever they want to do. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to find out quickly, and it could cost you money. It could you will make mistakes. We have made mistakes. If you don't have a solid grasp on a integral piece of your business. I think now sitting here talking to you right now, I have 100% more information and knowledge on, what it takes to be a tech company than I did,
Do you feel like you needed, so you were, and I remember these early conversations, you were really building the first version of the product, and I'm just going to, we'll just call it using off the shelf, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of it is off the shelf tech, right? Because that's what's accessible. What are some of the pitfalls that you've discovered of, because now you're doing a more like you're building that stack, right?
Yep.
Do you feel like when you were starting out, and again, I'm just talking like, V1, you don't know anything at this point. Is that still a good approach to go off the shelf to poke holes in things, knowing that you're going to have to tear some of it down? Or do you think it's like, man, we got to be prepared for the long haul from the drop.
From the drop.
Okay.
Once you fire the gun and you're off to the races, you should know, where this thing's going to be, what it's going to, and the people that you deal with need to, you need to find the right people. Luckily, we're with a company that they're ridiculously smart. Once we started dealing with them, not only did they show us where the technology has to be, but also like the business strategy behind it. So these guys were extremely smart. They developed BNY Mellon's online banking platform.
Yeah. So there's security, there's tech, right? There's scalability, all that. Yeah.
Exactly. So once we got with them, things became infinitely clearer, better. But not knowing that early on, I think. That was one of the things where I would say, yes, I wish that I knew that. And I would encourage anybody that's going to get into a startup to do as much research as you can, because ultimately, if you don't, it's just going to cost you more money.
Do you feel like how deep do you need to go? Because now you are, I guess, if we look at that from the perspective of, is it, and maybe it's like, are you, at this point, are you familiar with like the actual, the language that this is being developed in, the kinds of hosting environment? Do you have to go that deep, or are you just kind of like, I need to know what is enough to be dangerous in your world? So
I think what we should have done it right out of the gate is we should have interviewed, at least 6 different companies.
Okay.
And then
instead of just, can you build it? Go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Ask them, because a lot, again, like the original price point for us was like, this is enough, you can obviously afford it, and you're like, we can,
we'll spin it up and go.
Yeah, we'll run with this, and then, we'll continue to upgrade as we go along and make money. But it's, first market research, second, make sure what you're doing is legal.
Yeah.
And number 3, the 3 of them are as important. You could juggle them around, but they all need to happen. 5 companies, get a quote.
Yeah.
Get it, at least go with the best, go with the mid cap, and you will be able to figure out, what you're, I think, a more of a solid baseline than we had. We have it now, but
you didn't the first year or so.
No.
It's the founders are you and Ted.
Mm-hmm.
And then how important do you think, again, this is all like retrospective, right? How important do you think it is or is not to have a technical co-founder? Like, do you think you can do this without, because at some point, I guess here's where I'm going with it, is like, even if you are bringing on a great company, right? in some ways, you are really entrusting like the structure of this business to someone that doesn't necessarily have an equity stake in it. And can you still build a company that way, or do you really need to have someone in there that has a vested interest in that company?
So, initially when we started it, we had Ted's brother who had done web development, he had done websites. So he brought a lot of knowledge, as much as he had to it. So we felt, he was basically our project manager. So we felt as though that we had it. And again, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, sure.
He brought us to a certain point. If I could do it again, I probably would bring somebody on initially. But here's the problem. When you're a startup and you're on a shoestring budget, where are you going to get the money to hire somebody in tech? And here's the thing. You could hire somebody and still not get any farther than maybe you would without them. It's a combination of finding that right person. We felt a little bit more comfortable because we had somebody that was working with us side by side, and that was a family member of a co-founder. So we had a little bit more of
a little bit of trust.
Yeah. Right. But again, it's like, you can only be taken so far with it. And what we're doing, and with the advancements in technology, you're going to have to go with a company. So that one is like with anything with a startup, it's like, yes, no, but I think with any technology company, you yourself have to get extremely well versed on it, and then you have to hire the right people and someone that really, really knows what they're doing. And then from there, you need to be learning that. I say this a lot. If I get a litigation case, I try to stick with stuff that I know, but sometimes something will come across your desk and you have to kind of learn the business aspect of it. I do a lot of real estate litigation. So I also do transactional real estate, and I do the litigation piece of it is because I know the business side of it. So I'm not coming into it completely foreign. I know every intricacy on the legal side and the business side, and that informs things where somebody coming into it cold will not know those nuances. So that's kind of where I think, you have to become.
You got to become the technical asset.
Yeah, exactly. You're as much as you may not want to, but it's, if you're going to survive, it's a necessity.
Let's talk about the first. There's a point where you guys built V1 of the product, okay, and you had some people test it. I was one of those folks.
Yep.
And then there's a point where I think you discover, oh crap.
Yes.
Right.
Oh yeah.
There's this moment.
It's like if you ever sparred in boxing or played like a contact sport, it's like when you get leveled.
Yeah. Everyone's got to, what's it Tyson said? Everyone's got to play until they get punched in the face.
That's exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Perfect.
And so was there a moment where you go, oh crap? And then how do you there's this moment where something is a fundamental problem, or you realize there's a fundamental problem. And then you have a decision to make. You're like, well, do we pull up stakes, or do we figure out how to empty our pockets, or figure out how to fund, like basically rebuild it?
Yeah.
What was that moment, and then how'd you make that decision?
So, it took longer than I wanted it to. But again, I will say it was that Mike Tyson moment, because, a startup is in many ways emotionally like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, people were testing it. You tested it at one point. We got feedback from a lot of people that are like, this is groundbreaking. This is amazing. And, so you're riding high.
Yeah.
And then, there's this lull, and you're like, okay, well, what's going
now?
on? And then you start to dig into it, and then a fundamental problem presents itself, and it's like, okay, this needs to be addressed. What do we do? And you have to take it head on. You have to be honest. And this is what I would say to somebody: if you have a partner in a startup, the person that you're going to do this with has to be somebody that you could share space with. Like when I say share space, like be with them for hours and hours and talk to them and be able to,
have difficult conversations.
Yes. And like, you're going to disagree. Like it happens, but it's like, we came to the conclusion, like, we've invested so much time and energy, so much effort. We're dead in the water if we don't move. Okay.
Yeah.
Like we need to get out of the way. Like we got a freight train coming at us. We got to get out of the way and do something or it's dead.
Yeah.
And so that for me was a very stressful situation. I would be lying if I wasn't like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I could do this anymore. Like, it's about, I mean, Ted and I in many ways hand wrote the logic that was going to be put into the technology. Okay, so we sat there with a pen and paper,
and wrote out decision trees, right?
Yeah. I mean, like we used to, we would meet like, so it wasn't like so mundane. We spent hours with each other on weekends. We'd usually go to the golf dome and like hit some balls to do something.
Yeah,
and then
while you're working.
Yeah, and then we would like sit there in like a diner and like we'd be writing them on like napkin stuff. Like stuff would just come.
Yeah.
Oh wait, if this happens, then this, then this. Oh wait, and then this, and it was all handwritten.
Yeah.
So like to go through all that and then have to make that decision. Yeah, it was like it was one of those things where you're like, wow, it wasn't just punched in the face. It was like we hit the mat. We got knocked down. And if you're going to be in a startup, if you're going to do anything in life, really, you have to be prepared to, one, get your ass kicked because it's going to happen, okay? Like there's no way that you're going to do a startup and you're going to like put yourself out there, be an entrepreneur. If you're going to get humbled, you're going to get knocked down. You may get humiliated. Like, I mean, it's like you are going to experience every negative emotion that your parents probably tried to protect you from. Like it could all happen in 1 month. Okay. So you have to have really thick skin. You have to have almost ferocious perseverance because if you don't, you're going to fail. I'm one of these people where, I think I was just kind of genetically, it didn't bother me if like I made a mistake or I failed or you know what I mean? I don't care what anybody really thinks. I care what I put out there, So for me, it wasn't like this existential, like, you tried and you failed. So like, like walk away. It was like, no, it was like we can build, we could move on from this, but just how do we do it? How do we learn from those mistakes? And, do I have the wherewithal to, emotionally, physically, mentally,
financially,
financially.
Go back to your family and be like, hey, remember that 15,000 that you wanted?
Yes,
we got to add a zero to that.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And that was, and that's the other so if you could pick all those pieces back up, put them back in your backpack and keep walking, then I think you have what it takes to do it. But if you don't, then you're dead. There's just no way,
There's also, though, a non-zero probability that you do all that and it doesn't work.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, it could all fail. Like,
right.
we're still, we're still in our, like, power-up phase. And, I think we have a better than, 50% chance of really succeeding, but we may not.
Yeah.
And again, you have to look at it like, if this whole thing fails and it all explodes, am I going to be okay financially? That's the first thing I would ask.
Yeah.
And if you're not, don't do it. Like, I'm one of these people, I'm conservative, like, fiscally to a point where you have, I'm never going to overextend myself. So like, I'm going to lose my house by going. Some entrepreneurs are like,
right.
Like, and some of them are billionaires. Like, I'm not saying that.
Yeah. But assume you're not that person.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, there's no, like, I value my wife, my kids, and, there's no way that I'm going to put all of that at risk. I will take a serious risk. I did take a serious risk. But I won't jeopardize my entire financial well-being or my family's. Some people will do that. Like, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing or not a bad or a good thing. It's just personally, I will take a very, very big calculated risk, but I'm not going to jump off a cliff and not know if there's water.
Well, that what I kind of do for a living, and it's like when I started this role, it's very much like, you got it, you could do it.
Yeah.
And after doing this for 10 years, I'm way more risk averse than I was when I started.
Got it, yeah.
Just because I've seen it go sideways in every way imaginable. You know, from financial to founder. I mean, when you watch things fall apart and have to watch people fall apart.
Oh, it sucks.
It's awful.
Oh yeah,
and I'm
bad.
like, oh my God, I don't know if we should do this. So I think that's great advice. It's like there's levels of risk.
Yeah, and you gotta, and it's what you're comfortable with. And I think the other thing is startups, I think, are glamorized in our society. Sure. Everybody's like, I tell people about a startup. They're like, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, dude. Good for you. Like kind of like almost like shit, I should have done that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? but it's really,
I know. How hard, just how hard.
It is the hardest thing. Okay, I've went through 4 years of college, did really well, went through 3 years of law school, which was brutal. I did a bar exam, which was horrid. I went through my first couple of years of practice. I worked with a big firm. I've done really, really hard, arduous like stuff that will, knock you down and you won't get back up. This was the hardest thing I ever did. By far, the hardest thing I ever did. And if you're looking into it like it's going to be some cakewalk, you are seriously mistaken.
Let's talk about. So I love that you've just like crushed everyone's dreams that listen to this. Don't do it.
No, do it. It's just make sure it's going to be the hardest thing you're ever going to do.
You had talked to me, and we hadn't talked much before we spoke today. And I remember, the core. Let's just talk really quick about the customer, because we had talked originally where it's like, and even in the beginning of this conversation, you were like, oh, most people, this is the current situation. We're offering a solution at kind of like 1/10 of the price, for whatever. But there's a whole, like, it's one thing to build the product, right? And then there's a whole other challenge of trying to get people to find you and use you and convert, right? So that's one issue. I guess part one of my question is, before I ask part two, is how are you thinking about that? It's one thing to just build it, but then people don't think about how am I going to drive traffic to it? How are you thinking about that?
So, when we first did it, I mean, for me, it was, I'm very much kind of pound the pavement type of, my dad was a pharmaceutical salesman, so it's kind of in the blood. Like for me, it was like, I'll sell this thing.
Really?
I don't care what I have to do. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so it was like, if I'm going to shout it from the rooftop, if I'm going to talk to anybody and everybody, I'm going to find a way to get it out there. And it happened. We did a news interview with WKTV.
Yeah, I remember this.
And I remember my somebody going to me like, "Are you nervous?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Everything we put into this thing."
Right.
I'm like, "I'll go. I'll do pretty much anything to get it out there." And it like really took just from talking about it. So I knew that we got a lot of really positive feedback when that happened. So I knew right then and there that we were onto something. And then it was like, I'm like, all right, well, let's just use that model. Let's just, and again, it was kind of free because we kind of, it was free. We talked to, and they're like,
just go talk to people.
They're like, this is really cool story. Like, we want to do this story. And then from there, we ended up, we were on Channel 9 News in Syracuse. We were doing that, and then we were on Spectrum News, but we weren't. And then we started to not get the same kind of feedback.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, what are we doing wrong? Like, it's the same message, same great message.
Yeah.
Is it me? Like, what? And then it was like, okay, now we need to think about a serious marketing strategy, which brings on a whole other area of financial costs.
Yeah.
And then it's like you're talking about, okay, now we need investors. Now we need more. Now we need money. We need more money. So then it's like you become, okay, I'm not, then you come to the conclusion where I'm not going to be the, me and my co-founder, we're not going to be the ones that are solely financing this thing. And now then it's like, okay, we expand. And then it's like that whole other song and dance of, do we find the right vendor? Who do we find? And, so you're doing that.
Yeah, you're back to square one from marketing. Now you're just marketing the product.
Marketing for me wasn't as hard as the technological piece because I just, for me, I sell a lot in my own practice. Somebody comes in my office and they have a legal problem. I'm not, selling them, on something that I think they should do where they're going to lose, but I'm going to be very confident in telling them exactly where I think a case is going or exactly what I think they should do, advise them. And that in and of itself is a sell because you're selling yourself and you're being confident about what you're talking about. And so, the marketing piece I got, but what I didn't understand is like how this whole thing works, Google buys and conversion, and we talked about it. That's a foreign language.
Oh, it's great, and it's a long term. You're going to set a bunch of money on fire to figure this out. Right?
That was and that's the other that's the other concept. You're going to set money on fire.
Yeah,
like honestly, like if you're going to start a startup, take $1,000, light it on fire, and be like, okay, this is
get used to that feeling.
This is totally going to happen because I'm going to put money somewhere that's going to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But then so then there's that learning curve, but having learned from doing it, I was very, very much more in tune of like where that line was. It's like, okay, we talk to a lot of different marketers and you kind of hear the same buzzwords, so for us, we kind of play, put our toes in the water in a bunch of different pools And I was able to quickly be like, I don't want to do that. Not, go a different direction here, do something different here. So that was more of like a chess match where, move the parts around the board. We like this, we don't like that. So I felt a lot more in control of the marketing. And we're still doing marketing. You know what I mean? That's never going to go away.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like you have to be extremely strategic on a very small budget. And, that's another thing that you have to be really cognizant of is like you could, somebody said this to me. I thought it was a really, really smart thing. And it's very simple. You can always find a lot of people that will spend your money. Okay. And they'll do a great job at it, but it's, where does this dollar help the company? So if you're looking for validation by spending money and paying people, that's not going to help your business. You know what I mean? What's going to help the business is conversions, is sales. Okay, that's how you know you're going to do. You're doing okay. Your sales are increasing.
Once you found a partner or partners, I guess, and you're playing around, like, does it become? I'm really simplifying this. Does it become as simple as we found the right keywords, ad placement, where we just put money in the machine and customers comes out, and then it becomes an optimization play? Or are you just kind of like, we're still trying to figure out who the audience is, where they are, and what platforms they're on?
We're very much in that exploratory stage, because again,
can you buy conversions essentially? I mean, if you throw enough money at it, can you just get people where they're gonna get in the funnel where they'll at least test get the product and you can get some feedback?
Well, what we've found is a lot of people will come to the site. A lot. The numbers, like I think we looked at our marketing report last week. It was like 1,600 people looked at it.
And that's based on intent. Like there's a need. They're going to the site because there's intent.
The intent's there, and that's kind of where I go back to that fundamental, train coming at you problem. The tech. We came to the conclusion that like we need to completely rebuild this thing. We are doing cutting edge AI, infused aspects of it that is going to be the best on the market for this product. We knew that we were dead if we didn't do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we're doing that. Without getting into too much business specifics, we basically took on other investors. We were able to fund, the rebuild, and that, that's great. We needed to do it because it was a, ride or die type of moment. But now it's like, okay, but we're not just, we don't have $40,000 a month to put in. We don't even have close to that to put into marketing. So now you still have to be very, very strategic about it. It's like, what converts it. So, we're still, it's like you talk to a lot of marketers like, it's great, go after those new home buyers and the young families. Right now, I don't see that, the majority of the people that buy our product, these are folks that are between 50 and 70 years old. They just haven't done it yet.
They just haven't done it yet. Yeah.
And I'm telling you, like that market is huge. It is. People, you would be.
There's a lot of 50 to 70-year-olds out there, right?
But you would be shocked at the people that don't have a will. It shocked me, but it's borne out in the statistics. In America, 62% of the population do not have an estate plan. So you think about, when you get your pitch deck together, when you go to investors and you're begging for money, which, again, in and of itself is another, very humbling experience, you need to point to that because the market's there. It's just that, just because a market is there, there is a mountain of work that has to be done to reach that market and deliver a product.
Yeah.
So, it's, that's where the money or the tires meet the road, so to speak.
That was going to be, I guess that leads me to part two of the question, which was, part one was talking about the marketing strategy, and then kind of part two was getting into that in investor relationship strategy where, when you have to go out and raise money, that's the number two question I get from people that work with me is, can you introduce me to some investors? And I'm like, no, right? Because in most cases, the business that I'm working with a person on is not scalable. How did you go about bringing on other investors, vetting investors, meeting investors?
So our first investor, one of the things early on that we thought would be a really, really, great way to scale this to the mass market and like who would need this. I come from a construction background. My uncle was a mason. My grandfather was a mason. I worked in construction like during college, like on summers. And I looked at it, I'm like, these are, you're like trade work, union workers, these are people that do a really hard job and they're, kind of up really early and, they don't have time, but, kind of like, and not in a cliche way, they build America, So I was like, these are the people that need this, because if you're in a work site accident, and something happens, like, what do you do? What's going to happen to your kids? What's going to happen to your, so that little interplay, we were like, we should target unions.
Yeah.
And so our first investor was somebody that, has been in the union for, his family for 80 years. And we, met with him over the course of like probably 4 or 5 months. And, he was involved in, kind of demoing it and saw it. And, he was our first investor. And, we're starting to see a lot of really positive movement, with the union piece of our sales strategy.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to ask you about, because we had talked about this, where it's like, okay, it's one thing to go after the new family or the person that's done it, right? And there's a cost in Google ads and marketing that gets to that conversion. So, this idea of are you hunting antelope or are you hunting field mice, right? You can get those conversions.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing you say is, but we could bundle this with a union contract for 10,000 seats, 10,000 users at a lower price point, and then is that still part of the strategy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm very much shoot the fish in the barrel.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. Who the customer is like. Yeah. Okay. When we're a multi-million-dollar company, sure. I'll get a little creative with trying to make it. New, but no, you need to be realistic. You need to focus on the people that are buying it. Like, we know who buys. We know their ages. And it's like, this is who you market at. Like, I'm not opening up a new flank on every 28-year-old or 30-year-old.
Right.
It's not
you're not going to convert them.
No.
You're just not gonna.
Yeah, you can maybe like 2, 3, 4,
sure.
5%. But why? Do you want to?
The effort's not worth it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. You go where. Where the water is. You don't try to, open up a pond in the desert. You throw yourself in the biggest lake possible and start fishing.
Cool.
So that's, and that was one of the things, because I feel like, one of the things is everybody, wants to be like real hip and smart,
sure.
and like, we're going to change, I'm like, no.
We're selling wills.
It's
right,
exactly. It's like, I'm not trying to, and that's kind of like my, that's where my, business acumen is. It's like, we're breaking the market already, right? I don't need to, be like, yep, got our first 28-year-old, which is fine. I'm not saying a 28-year-old shouldn't have the will, but I'm not going to spend a ton of marketing dollars right now to do that. I want somebody that's 50 years old that maybe has some comorbidities, or maybe their wife does, or maybe their family does, and they're like, "Oh man, what am I going to do here? I got 4 kids that are in high school. This should be done right now."
Yeah,
that's who I want to help, and that's who you're going to help, because that's what the product is for. I talked to somebody last night, somebody that a really really good friend, almost like who I consider like family, doesn't have a will.
Yeah.
Not that they can't afford it. That's the craziest thing about them.
Well, no one wants to think about it. We don't want to think about it.
No, yeah. That's and so it there's like these, I came up with this, there's like 3 things that prevent people from getting a will. Number 1 is they don't want to think about death. Number 2, it's really expensive. And number 3, nobody wants to go sit, take time out of their day and go sit at a stuffy law office. Mm-hmm. Coming from a lawyer who sits in a stuffy law office, it's just a fact.
Well, I think when my wife and I were looking at kind of going through this as well, like the number 4 is, making sure you're in alignment on these big choices.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, if we don't do that, we don't have to worry about if we're in alignment. And it forces you to confront some of these things where it's like, oh, what should we do about the kids? Or
right there.
Like that's a hard conversation.
I'm the co-founder of an online do-it-yourself estate planning company. The hardest conversation I had to have was with my wife, and it was the question, if we both die at the same time, who's going to take care of our kids?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That took, like, literally, it was like there was fights over it. Okay.
Right.
I mean, there was serious, like, fundamental arguments over it, and it's like that. And some people are like, I don't want to even deal with this.
Right.
But
nobody wants to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's like, but you have to, because here's the thing. This is something that I tell. I've sat in local unions in Long Island. I look at all these members. I'm like, how many people have kids? And everybody raises
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people raise their hands. I'm like, okay, do you want a judge or the state to deciding who takes care of your kids if you and your wife, God forbid, die? Okay, like not to bring up a really, really morbid thought, but like Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant died with his kids. Horrific. Okay, him and his wife had a plan that they would never fly together for that reason. Okay, but imagine. Most people don't have private helicopters. You know what I mean? If you're flying, chances are you're going to be with your wife, okay? Or your significant other, whoever that, wife, husband, whatever. And if you both go down in that plane, you need to have a plan for the kids, because it's not so much like, I want them with this brother and not that brother, or, it's really like, who do you want to take care of your children that share your
values?
That's it. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's not like, it's happening every day, but like that's the most important thing I would say to anybody who's in the 40, 50, or 60-year-old. Yeah, probably more 40, 50, early 60s. You're probably still not having kids at that point. But, you could still have younger kids. You need to, because think about it. Like, could you, bear the thought of, family members or people like, let's say I got a brother I don't never even talk to who lives in California or wherever, Alaska, I don't care. And he has zero values that are commensurate with the ones that me and my wife have. Imagine somehow that he's the one that gets to take care of you.
Right.
Yeah. Or an aunt or an uncle. You don't know. I would never I'll tell you.
And I like you say that they get to. It's like ain't nobody happy in that situation.
Yeah. No.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
It's like who's going to give him a warm bed to sleep in? Who's going to have the majority of a semblance of the values that you possess.
This has turned into such a downer in the last 5 minutes.
It is. Well, and that's why you need to get a will, because we're all gonna. Unfortunately, we are a species that was born to die.
Yeah.
And you have to, and that's why I try to kind of make it a little bit more. Some of our marketing strategy is you want to put a comedic tone to it.
Sure.
Because yes, it's morbid. We're talking about death, but it's like. What I need to do is, we need to get it out there in the market and say, listen, it's going to be worse when you die and you don't have this, okay? Because then the people you leave behind are going to be tearing each other's throats out because you didn't make a plan, and now it's all your fault. So how do you feel now? Right?
So on that note, where can people find more about getting their will done with you guys if they're interested in not having their loved ones tear each other's throats out?
Exactly. So www.vlawsity.com, Vlawsity.com. It's obviously a play on words, and I would encourage everybody that listens to this to go check it out. If you don't have a will, go get one. It is brick and mortar law firm grade. You get a will, you get a power of attorney, you get a healthcare proxy, you get a guardianship if you have children. That's what I was talking about, who's going to take care of your kids. You get a HIPAA, and you get all of those things, all of them, okay, for $150 if you're a single person and $250 if you're a couple. You could go the other route and pay $1,500 or $2,000 to a lawyer, but, 2 lawyers made this product, and I can tell you that the forms we use are better than the ones that you're going to find out there, if not the exact same thing.
The other thing you left out, sorry to jump on your pitch, is you get a paper version as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like, you get your PDF and do something with
Literally,
it.
Right?
Like it's nice when this showed up at my home.
Yeah, that's kind of the best part of the company.
Yeah.
Good thing you brought it up. Shame on me. What comes to your door is this beautiful packet, and it has everything color coded. We have instructions that literally, it's an arrow that says sign here, notarize here. We also, if you don't have access to a notary, our company offers an online notary service. It's legal in New York to do a notary, like if you're sitting here and the notary's anywhere else in New York State. So the ease of use to do it is there's no excuse not to do it anymore.
Let's leave it there, Kevin. This was great.
Yes,
I
loved it. I'm so happy to kind of bring my passions and my failures of startups to the forefront. And I'm serious. This was a business therapy session. I loved it.
appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It was great. Yeah. That was a ton of fun. I want to thank Kevin for being here. That was refreshingly honest. That was a really great time. If you want to learn more about what Kevin's doing, or if you need a will or power of attorney, any of those things, check out Vlawsity.com. If you don't not watching it on YouTube, you can go to VLAWSITY.com and check out the product there. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you like and subscribe, and join me for the next time I put an episode out. Thank you so much for your notes and your subscriptions and all that stuff. And I really hope that something awesome happens to you today.